Okay, so in part two now, let's. I left off the last one saying that we had a little bit of extra logic going on here with the the statuses right here. So really the big thing is that I did mention before, excuse me, which you didn't see, was that each one of these guys basically is like it has a little check mark next to it. And again, I'm referring to the original application right here. So you'd log in and you'd have these little check marks. And these check marks are a nice visual way of saying you've completed this activity. So team and contact info is what this table is right here, team register, right? So this is the team information that we can go back to this form at any time and update our information. But of course, when we first create our account, this step is actually done, right? So we've already created our team and contact info from this original form right here. And so that is why we want to make sure that in our logic that we create here, we have a check mark essentially for this particular section. So let's build that out first. So back under team register, we have this second right here. And so we have a table called team status. Whoops. And so I've clearly gone through again, and I've kind of game planned this out in terms of what I want to call this. Let's actually build this table real quick. So very simply, I'll just go into tables, new table, and paste that in, and just add a few fields here. So this is kind of unnecessary, but we'll create this anyway. And then we've got a different statuses. So what are our statuses going to be? So the first one is going to be the, let's actually scroll up here. Well, actually here, just so we stay consistent. User ID. So we do need user ID column, obviously. So let me do that first. Int. Okay. So obviously the user ID is going to tie them back into the user ID right here. Or I should say the ID, excuse me. User ID is this field right here, this ID right here. So obviously you have user ID. That will just be the auto increment field from this guy right here. But we do have these four statuses. So what are the four statuses that we're concerned with? Well, the under team manage, these are basically it right here. Team and contact info, important info, team roster. So let's kind of come up with some creative names for this. So the first status will be info, right? And we'll just set this to an int field. And we're going to have its default value set to 0. Nay, 1. Nay, 0 for the point of this discussion. The team roster, actually let's say, so what's our first one? So info, let's say terms, because right, this is terms and conditions. And its default value is going to be 0. So in other words, the default of 0 means that this has not been completed yet. And this is important that we have a default value because when we query this right here, as we'll see shortly, it's important that we are able to show a little check mark or not based on that field. So terms, and let's say, actually those are really the only two that we are concerned with, but then we'll say roster. And we're not actually going to implement that in the course of this video. But we could, if we wanted to, create some logic. And save that table. We could create some logic which says until you've added a player, the team roster, or we could even say a number of players, the roster field will equal 0, right? So in other words, if that is actually a requirement of this system, that the tournament, in order for you to be valid to enter into tournaments in the first place, you have to have a certain number of players. We could certainly add some logic like that. We won't do that in this example, but we could certainly do that. So okay, so a lot of talking. Let's actually get coding here. So, right, so we got these fields right here. We want to then query these and basically say whether that step has been completed. So the easiest way to do that in RackForms is by using the query module. So I'm going to then say select all, and usually I don't like select all, but in this case, because I know these are just int fields, I'm actually fine with that. And I don't want to have to go back if there's more statuses that are added and tweak this. So in this case, select all is totally fine. I'm going to say select all from team status. I believe it was status. Double check. Team status. Whoops. Where user ID equals the variable that we pass. And of course, we have a session that we're setting here in the logins section. So we're going to have this ID right here. So this user ID right here. And In terms of feature in RackForms, I actually just added this, but this is the SR token it's called. And I believe it looks something like this. So session raw just means because we're using, oops, not quite there though, because we're using prepared statements here for security so we can avoid SQL injection, we want to make sure that we still use the tokenized form of this. So we're going to use session raw right here, but we're going to be using still just this raw session value of user ID. Right? So session raw user ID. So that should get us a record. Now, just for the sake of this working, we're actually going to create a new record right here. So this user ID is 1. So user ID equals 1. And those should have filled in with default values. I'm actually not sure why these didn't fill in with default values. Sometimes this program gets a little bit flaky. Yeah, so let's actually double check that real quick here. All these defaults should be 0. Not sure why they didn't default. Let's actually, just out of curiosity, try creating a new record here again. And commit that. And so it's not, for some reason, setting the default. I don't honestly know why it's doing that. It may be that, no, it wouldn't be required. Let me just try this. Well, actually, let's not do that. This almost may be just a side effect of the program because they should be getting default. But that's why you'll notice in the last video I actually went through and I specifically wrote a default value to these guys. Yeah, so we're just going to write this in by hand for now. We'll take a look at that. We'll revisit that later. But anyway, so we have 0 for our values right now. And I should just say, to be clear, we build this job, so we save this. Under team register here, this is what I meant by we have default values being written anyway. Right, so I'm going to write to this team status right here, user ID values. And we're not actually caring about the default value for the fields. Team manage, go back here. But we should obviously care about it here. Yeah, but I do not like this though. It may be that something is weird with this program. Let me try insert into. I'm sorry to, and this is, I guess, development for you. Team, let's set this to RackForms. This is team status, user ID values 1. And just out of sheer curiosity, let's see if that helped. Okay, so now it looks, it must be that this application just doesn't do that properly. So if I do it by hand, which is of course what we're going to be doing here in our team register, so I should, when here I say mean in our team register job, it looks like that's going to be fine. Let's try 34. Let's try this one more time just to be sure. I just don't, yeah, this looks like it's just a bug in the program. So it is getting proper default values. So I don't know why this isn't working. Right? Let me close the table. Yeah, so that's a little bit weird. So I don't know if it's just a bug in this program, clearly. So shame on you guys for scaring me like that. So okay, so we can assume that when we're using insert statements, not even assume, we know that we're using insert statements, we're going to get the proper behavior. And yeah, this may just have to do with the fact that these fields need to be set to not null or something. Maybe this program looks at nulls versus not nulls and does something weird. I have no idea, but I don't like how it does that because I like it when things mess with me like that. Anyway, so okay, so now we can assume, we know, shouldn't be using the word assume, we know that we're going to have zeros when we use the insert. And I could prove that to us, of course, but no need to do that because we're developers here. So select all. Okay, so the idea here then is we're going to select all, and then we should get a nice data dump based on a user ID. So let's actually just run this right here. This logic should already be done. Just using a password and user ID of test, we should be able to log in. And sure enough, then here is the data dump from this query, and we get a user ID of 1. right? So we do have a record right here. And then, of course, we have info terms and roster. So I'm going to stop this video right here so we don't run over time, and we'll take a look at the actual implementation in the next video.